We will begin with the Arabesque from the 24 Pieces in Freestyle by Louis Vierne. This is a great piece to begin with concerning the lyrical style because it starts with a single melody in the right hand that the student can focus on and a simple accompaniment in the left hand on the first page. It then goes on and it adds more voices, but the A section returns at the end, and this piece can be found on IMSLP. We're just going to focus though on the first page. That's a new phrase. Coming on the new phrase here. Timing is so very important in this piece. And because you have 9 beats to experiment with timing, again, this is why this piece is so great. Because you can experiment with rubato, especially robbing Peter to pay Paul, and moving forward with the musical line. In measure 4 of the piece, there's a crescendo marking, and a sense of moving forward and energizing the line forward can help with projecting the crescendo. As you get to that peak, a sense of arrival to that peak and pushing towards that peak as a goal is very helpful. Having goals as far as where the phrase begins, where there's a peak and where there's an end is helpful in this style of music. And so the motive repeats. When I had the fast-moving passages, I was giving a bit of emphasis to the first note and then I fall. Preparing the hand over the notes before I play them also is helpful because then my fingers just simply fall. But I am trying to give a sense of phrasing to that by placing an emphasis on the first note and then falling. The next concept with this piece would be the idea of legato phrasing. And we know that Vierne was so very good with this, given the accounts of people that heard his playing. What is legato phrasing? So legato phrasing is basically connecting one phrase to the next without break, but playing in such a way where the audience or the listener will be able to recognize that a new phrase has started. In this instant, using a agogic accent, where you're basically playing with time at the beginning of a new phrase, can help to achieve this without breaking the legato. Here's an example new phrase. You move. That whole idea of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Taking time at the end of the previous phrase into the beginning of the next phrase. Then moving along to make up the time. And so it matches and supports the crescendo marking where you're pushing the line ahead that's indicated in the score. So this is why the legato and over legato context is so important, and knowing where you want to implement an over legato and how much, because it supports this idea of legato phrasing where you begin a new phrase without breaking the legato touch. In contrast to the Vierne, the Buxtehude setting on Nu bitten wir den Heiligen Geist, 208, that's the setting that we're talking about, uses ordinary touch and more swinging from the knuckle. The attacks and the releases are going to be slower, but the concept is still the same, that you want to be expressive in playing. Here, the sections and the breaths are in smaller sections, outlining the ornamented chorale, but each motive passes you to the next. Here, I'm also allowing the key to lift my finger. I'm not doing a fast attack out of the key when I release the note, but I'm allowing the key to push up my finger. On the long notes, I help that by allowing the knuckle to raise, and also that gives a sense of crescendo through the long notes. The same in the accompaniment. Staying close and preparing the notes before I play also help. This does not require a lot of weight, as we'll talk about in the chord section, where chords do require weight. It's delicate. So again, always having your body language at the instrument represent the music. The same for the pedal, preparing the motions in the pedal. Ordinary touch, there will be space, and you'll press the key down, but it won't require a lot of weight. The next piece, In Quiet Mood by the African-American female composer Florence Price, is another great piece to build one artistic expression concerning the lyrical style. You have a melody in the left hand and a chordal accompaniment in the right hand. And again, a slow attack into the key and allowing the arm and the hand to do most of the work for you will help you in expressing the style and the legato touch. Larger intervals will have more of an over legato, and smaller intervals will be less so. In the right hand, you have a chordal accompaniment in the Price piece. Here, there's interest drawn to the top line, which the audience will hear. The inner voices rock back and forth, like a cradle. It really creates that lullaby effect. And together, here we're in 4/4, but I want to project a macro beat of 2. And again, you as the teacher working with your student can decide on all of these artistic decisions and incorporating the beat that you want to express. But again, slow into the key, taking your time of a slow attack and a release will help. I also did some sharing in between the manuals just to help out with the legato. Of course, that will depend on the size of your hand and where you place the accompaniment and the solo. In the Toccata in E minor by Pachelbel, which is a pedal point toccata, the opening involves the left hand, which is outlining the E minor triad, and the right hand responding. It's a very improvisatory piece, and so this is encouraging the student to experiment with timing of the musical line and how much freedom they have, and also establishing the opening section of the free work, which establishes the key and the affect and the mood. Here, thinking about placing more emphasis on the first beat and then making up the time with the rest of the measure can help the student have a goal within the perpetual motion. It also helps the student to not get lost amongst the sea of notes. So that is the opening of the toccata, and again, just like with the Vierne, you can experiment with going too far and over-exaggerating and then being more nuanced with your freedom. But clarity is very important. It involves a faster attack into and out of the key and more of an active finger. Preparing the note before you play and staying close to the key is also essential in perpetual motion because of the speed. You don't want to be too high or too far away from the keys because that will require more work on the part of the student. So you're also helping the student to understand and experiment with control of the finger. So I will play the opening measure again, and then our goal will be the cadence and the second measure. Here we have a phrase elision because the cadence is also establishing the new section. Going on in the next section, we have the main notes that are in quarter notes in the right hand. And then we have the inner motive. So that's in the background, the inner voices, and then the main melody and quarter notes are in the foreground. So you're dealing with having the student listen for the different voices and how they want to emphasize certain voices to stand out, as far as certain voices being louder and other voices being quieter. If I put that all together, and again, I'm right on top of the key. My wrists are light. I'm out of the key with the finger action because I don't want to have weight in my hand that bears down my hand, but keeping my hand nice and light, which allow my fingers to move. Okay, the next section we have scalar passages in the toccata. So this is why scales are so very important for fingering. Of course, it depends on if you're using modern fingering or early fingering, again, for the teacher to decide based on the context of the student. Here, again, goals in a sense of where you're going is so important to establish in perpetual motion because it lets you know where your rest posts are, again, so that you don't get lost in the sea of notes. There are points of going forward, and then there are points of arrival, helping the student to understand where the motion goes forward and then where they arrive, usually at a cadence within this piece, within the context of this piece, can help them to establish where those goals are. With the scalar passages in the 16th notes, I'm using a basic ordinary touch, and I'm out of the key. In measure 7 of the piece, I have a descending figure, and here this is quicker, where I'm drawing the fingers into the palm of the hand. So here it's a fast swing into the key from the knuckle and then drawing the fingers back into the palm of the hand. So that definitely is a moving forward point to the arrival. I'm also putting a little bit of space as well in the pedal and a little bit of separation just to help to clearly establish the harmony from the bass upward, which was again a practice of this time. The next section where we have a sequence, and it's a little bit of both, where you have the ordinary touch and then you also have the pulling out touch, where you're a bit quicker and the finger is coming into the palm of the hand with the sequence. Again, here, I'm just going to put a little bit of separation. I'm going to add the pedal and put separation in the pedal just to clearly establish the harmony of the sequence. with the fast sections, I'm always putting a bit of emphasis on the first note, like a diver. I want to get my grounding before I go. So just putting a bit of emphasis on that first note with a faster attack into the key, and then using that as a springboard to go forward. The rest of the piece, going forward to the end, incorporates techniques that we have discussed. And again, this is a good piece, especially dealing with the Baroque style and ordinary touch, because it's not too long and it's sectional, and each section requires a different focus and a different affect. The next piece, the Canon in C major by Robert Schumann, German Romantic composer, is a canon at the octave. We start with the first motive, and the canon comes in at the octave on the third beat. So it's like a chase between the hands. Here you have a pedal that's repeated, and then you also have a moving line. Same thing in the left hand. Here, this is a relatively active finger. Again, you're going to be close to the keys. The hands are going to be also light. And you want to create this sense of descending and falling. That's our first quarter note, and the quarter note is followed by a tie, so we're going to squeeze that tie for all that it's worth before we move on. Then we have an arpeggio in D minor, and that's on the fourth beat, and we can take a little bit of time as we arrive to the first beat, similar to what we did in the Vierne. As you go on and so forth. Here, the motive again moves downward, and I like to think of it blossoming and opening. So the hand also is going to reflect that. Again, it's helpful to have the student understand that their body language at the organ should reflect the music. Even though there is a lot of finger action and the notes are moving, what is the macro beat, or what is the bigger picture that you want to focus on instead of each individual 16th note? Placing the hand and preparing it over as many notes as possible is also helpful, because then that just allows the fingers to descend into the key. Here, this is a great piece for perpetual motion and also the trio form, because you can do combinations of right hand pedal, left hand pedal, working with the metronome, using different practice techniques, and then putting all three voices together. And there's also repeats as well. So when you've learned one section, that section is going to return. So the student will not be too overwhelmed. And it's, again, helping the student to not lock their hand and lock their wrist, but keep a sense of lightness in the hand and the fingers moving. I would like to begin with the Pasticcio from the 10 pieces by the 20th century French composer Jean Langlais. As a side note, on November 9th, Dr. Anne Lubunsky from Duquesne University will be closing out the webinar series, and she will be talking about the life and the works of Langlais, so you don't want to miss that. Okay, this is a good piece, the Pasticcio, to start with because you are not required to play chords over a long period of time. And there are different expression markings in the score that indicate different touches that the player wants to go for. So here you have a triad in the right hand, and there's the melody that is on top. It's helpful to think of playing the chord with a forward motion versus a vertical motion. Dr. Wilma Jensen, who has recently given many workshops and is currently writing an addendum to organ method books, will be talking about this. And she suggests having a sense of support that comes from the gut outward. So thinking of the energy starting at your core and your center outward, that gives you the boost to move forward. Also, the elbow supports you as well, and it acts like a shock absorber to help you support yourself in playing the chord. As soon as you play the chord, you want to release the hand. Remember, I mentioned the challenge is to not lock the wrist. You can start off slowly, just to get the student to move forward and release the hand versus locking the wrist. So here, we begin with the quarter note, which is going to be longer, followed by eighth notes in the first measure, and there's a staccato indication, which indicates to the player that this is non-legato. Toward the end of the Pasticcio, the A section returns on a bigger sound featuring the principals, the reeds, and the mixtures. Here again, you want to listen for the melody and make sure that the pipe is speaking fully and that the air is allowed to enter the pipe. So adjusting your touch is very important, as we all know, when playing any organ, but especially when you're on a louder sound. A difference is that you have a moving middle line within the chord in this section. Whatever fingering you choose, that middle line, you want the finger to be active and out of the key. In the next piece, by Felix Mendelssohn, the Allegro maestoso e vivace, from his second sonata in C minor, here we're dealing with chords and also counterpoint. You have a melody on top, but you also have interesting counterpoint underneath that melody that serves a particular function as far as the voice leading. We all know that there's been much scholarship and research into the phrasing of Mendelssohn and his organ works, and so that's up for the teacher to decide how they would like to approach that. But it's important to help the student make artistic decisions as far as how to bring out the different musical lines. Here's the top voice in the Mendelssohn. Here are some of the inner voices. And now all together. You also have the pedal line as well. That's an important part of this movement. When playing the pedal, to get a legato touch similar to the hands, you reach and press the note down. You're using your toe and your heel, and also just thinking about a lateral manner of approaching the motion. Again, it's helpful to have the full weight of the leg on the bench and to have that weight extend downward into the leg. And preparation over the note before you play it is also very important. In measure 16 of the Mendelssohn, where the new section began, again we have different voices, now written and ascending in a chromatic fashion. Here's the top voice. And the other voices, you have repeated notes such as the alto, and again keeping the thumb nice and light helps with those repeated notes so that they're not too heavy. You have the interesting musical line in the tenor. Now all together. And the next piece, the Minuet Gothique by Wellman, French Romantic composer, from his Suite Gothique, which is popular amongst organists. Here we have chords in perpetual motion. It is even more essential for the teacher to work with the student in making sure that the hand is not locked, but always moving because we are in perpetual motion. You also have different expression marks such as tenuto markings and staccato markings, which again give a different affect and approach to the way you're going to play the chord. And here the melody is on top. Here are the inner voices along with the top voice. And again, I'm placing the weight on the outer portion of the hand to emphasize the melody.